Hey everyone, my name's Krista. I did DCP in fall 2024, and these are some things that I wish I knew a little bit more about before coming to my program. And I hope you guys find this helpful because for me, I knew no one who had done the program before, and I was scouring the internet looking for stuff because I couldn't find it, and I was like, I really want to know this though. Hopefully this video finds you and you learn a little bit more, or you get just a little bit more information. But first things first, I do not speak for the brand or company. This is just based on my own experience, and let's get right into the video. So, some context. I am from California, and when I did the program, I had just graduated college the same year, so I did this program post-college. That's a little bit of context, but let's get into it. My role that I received was resort custodial. I know. It's actually not the worst. It's definitely like I was really hoping not to get custodial or food and beverage. Yeah, I was upset. Like when I opened up my temporary role, I know a lot of people post like, come with me as I reveal my DCP role, and they're like super excited. I was like crying. I spent the day crying over that I got custodial. Specifically just custodial. I wasn't even concerned about the resort aspect. I was like, I got custodial. Which is funny because when I was going through the program, they showed us like a pie graph of how they distribute the roles, and only 10% of people get sorted into custodial. And I was like, what are the odds? It was like 10 or 5%. I was like, what are the odds? What are the odds that I get custodial? I think when you're going into the Disney College program, there's a high probability that you might not get a role that you really want. There's a high probability that you'll get a role that you're like, really? I got this. But you just kind of grieve a little bit, and then you kind of like get excited about it. You know, like I thankfully was on a group meet, and I found some other people who were also in custodial, and we kind of like bonded together because of this, you know, fact that we were all custodials, and we're like, wow, like, can't believe all of us are custodials. Like great support people, and I feel like we encourage each other to give the role a try, and that you're not alone in the struggles of being a custodian at Disney World. So I think that was really helpful to have, you know, other groups of a group of people who are also kind of going through a similar struggle and grievance that you didn't get the role maybe that you wanted, but you know, it's gonna be okay. I think custodial does have a little bit of a bad rep, which I understand. Who wants to be cleaning up stuff or cleaning up codes or in the bathrooms? But I think there's a certain amount of freedom in custodial that you will not get anywhere else. Being a custodial, you have a lot of freedom. And I think that's something that a lot of these other roles don't have because you're assigned on, like you get bumped out. But custodial, you get assigned like an area. And for your shift, that's your area. So for however long you're working, that's your area. So it's a little bit different than like being like assigned an hour. Oh, you're on, like if you're working in food and beverage, oh, an hour you're to be on like busser. And then the next hour you're to be behind the line. You know, then the next one you're to be on like register. It's a little different than that. Like basically they say, here's your zone. This is what you need to clean, and just keep it clean. Keep it clean and keep it tidy. So that's kind of what you're doing. So there's a little bit more of a leeway. You can walk around, you can make conversation with guests. I know for me, I did do some pin trading, which was a lot of fun that I was able to pin trade at a resort. I feel like most times when you see videos or read anything, most people don't talk about resort custodial. So when I got the role of resort custodial, I was like, who has had this role? All the information I'm finding is all about the parks. And I will say the resort custodial is different than the parks. Way different. I personally worked at Riverside, Port Orleans Riverside. It was a huge resort. That plays into fact. I think if you get resort custodial, each resort is so different and they do things differently. I had other friends at different resorts and they did things so vastly differently just because of, you know, maybe what the needs of the resort are, the size of the resort, and just some of the other things. So at Riverside, personally, we had I was mostly on the closing team, which was a 3:30 to midnight shift, there was about like 9 or 10 positions that you could get, and that they tried to rotate you so you weren't like pool every single day, but sometimes that happened just because of things. I will say something about being a resort custodian is that you lack some of the guest interactions that you might have in the parks. Because typically, most people are at the parks. You know, there's not a ton of people at the resort always. And especially if you're out in the area. So at Riverside, we had, if you were in the lobby, there was 3 different positions in the lobby. If you were in there, you had a little bit more guest interaction just because, you know, people are to be anywhere in the resort. They're to either be in the lobby with the food, you know, because we had a sit-down restaurant, a bar, and a quick service in the lobby, all one building, or they're to be at the pool, or they're to be in the rooms. So if you are out in the area, you might not have a lot of guest interaction because they're just not out. So it's a lot of alone time. So be prepared for that, because I feel like what is shown online a lot is that, you know, in custodial, you have a ton of guest interaction, which I say you do, but I think those people are talking primarily about being a park custodian, not a resort custodian. Because parks, there's guests everywhere all the time. You're never not alone. But in the resorts, you're oftentimes alone, you know, sitting there in your Pargo, which is like a golf cart, alone. Driving around, making sure your area's clean, all the trash is picked up, doing pools and stuff. Don't go in expecting like I'm to have crazy amount of guest interaction as a resort custodian. Because at least at Riverside, because of how big the resort was, there was often times where you would go hours without seeing or really talking to another guest or even another person. I would just say that's like something to keep in mind, because I think if you do get the role of custodial, you kind of think, oh, I'm going to talk to a lot of people, or that's kind of like the stereotype or like the assumption of going into custodial. You're like, oh, I'm going to interact with guests so much and I'm going to like talk to them. And it's like, yes, you do, but as a resort, it's a different level than it is on the parks. And I knew people in park custodial and in resort custodial, and we had a different experience. And even the people who were at a different resort had a way different experience than me at my resort. And we were doing this technically the same job title. Also, if you're a resort custodian, you cannot pick up in the parks. You can only pick up at other resorts. Thankfully, there's quite a lot of resorts, so you're not to be like, oh, I can't pick up here. But as long as your training is all up to date, you can pick up at any of the resorts. And it's really easy to trade. Do not be afraid of trading your shifts, giving away your shifts. It's really easy. I would recommend getting on Facebook and getting into some groups for trading shifts. There's a couple different like resort custodian like trading groups, and there probably is going to be one for your own resort as well. So that was really easy to do. My resort, there's a lot of part-timers who were looking for days. So as a CP who is guaranteed full hours, it was really easy to, you know, give away your shifts to like a full-timer if they wanted the hours. If they were like looking for that day, you could be like, oh, I have that. You want that shift? Most of the time they would like say yeah, or like, oh no, like let me think about this. Another thing about resort custodial, your schedule does not, or at least at my resort, your schedule does not drop where everyone else's schedule drops. Because most of everyone else's schedule drops on basically Sunday at midnight, like 12 a.m. Your schedule will drop Wednesday at 12 a.m. So typically when I was on my Tuesday shift, we would all be standing around the clock out machine with Cast Live open to see what our new schedule was going to be. And then that's when you start your trades. You'll be kind of a little bit behind the people, like they're like a week out, you're like not a week out. It's a little tricky sometimes when planning in ahead. You're not a week out in advance, you're kind of just a couple of days. Your schedule would drop on that Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 12 a.m. situation, and your schedule's all the way till Saturday, your current schedule that you have out. But what drops on that week drops that Sunday. So you're only out like 4 days. So it's a little sometimes hard to make plans in advance, especially if you're making plans with sometimes the people who are working in the parks. because your schedules aren't dropping at the same time. So I think that's just something to keep in mind, and something that I didn't really see a ton. Like, I knew our schedules didn't drop at the same time, but you know, it wasn't something that I had really like thought about until there. And like when family's visiting or friends are visiting, and you're like, man, I really wish I had a little bit more of my schedule more in advance out. I think also you have to take everything with a grain of salt when you're reading things online, also like this video, because your experience will be so different. And also it really, I think, depends on your leadership, who, like, if you're in resort custodial or anywhere, like, your leadership can change things up. Because I know someone who worked in a resort and they got their schedule on Sundays. And I was like, why can't we all do that? Like, what's up? Like, is it just my resort? Like, I don't know. So just keep that in mind. There are differences between the resorts, even in custodial. Riverside, there was 3 shifts you could have. The morning shift, collections, which I'll get into, and the night shift. Mostly, if you're a CP, you're mostly going to be working nights. My shifts were 8.5 hours with basically got paid the 8 hours because you had to take a 30-minute unpaid break for mine. And my leadership liked it when you took your breaks all together. So you would take your 30-minute unpaid break and your 30-minute paid break all at once. Waterfall are break times. So like lobby female was like at like 7 to 8. Lobby male and the general clean were still at the lobby when lobby female went to take their break. Just so the coverage was still there. So if anything went wrong or if there was a situation that happened, they could be able to cover while you were on your break. So, and vice versa. Resorts do it differently because I knew someone who worked at the Riviera and they took their breaks. They had a 30-minute at one point of the day, like in the first half of their shift, and then the 30-minute at the end. But at my resort, they liked us to take the both 30s at the same time. Got the 30-minute paid and the 30-minute unpaid because I worked an 8.5-hour shift. So, well, your breaks will depend on how many hours you work. I know if you work like a 6-hour shift, you might only get a 15-minute break, which is kind of rough. I know a lot of people in food and bev experience that type of breaks. It was nice to be in custodial, to have that kind of long break, and to have the hour break was really nice. Honestly, sometimes it was really nice to take a break and like sit there for an hour and like chill, not have to think about like cleaning. Cleaning isn't bad. I don't know. You kind of get used to things, you know, like typically it's not terrible. There are some times where you will walk into the stall and you will be like, how did a guest do this? Like, how would a human do that? Or why would you leave it like that? And I think it also depends on the preference of your cords and your leaders of some of the things they expect you to get done. But, you know, every place is different. So go in there with, you know, low expectations. And also it's like cleaning up code Vs or a BBP, which is blood. It's not terrible. It's not the greatest thing, but you kind of get used to it. At my resort, we have horses. That's a unique offering at Riverside and French Quarter, specifically at Riverside, is that horse-drawn carriages. So we had to clean up horse poop, code H's, often. So if you were in certain areas, you were cleaning up horse poop. There was typically a code H, at least one, every single night. And you had to check the route, before heading back to make sure there wasn't anything unexpectedly left there from the horses when they left or from earlier in the night. So just keep that in mind that you are to be cleaning up like codes or code U. Things happen. So just like expect that it gets easier once you do it. I had to clean up a good chunk of like BBPs and also like code H's. I thankfully didn't have to do any code Vs. I was just never in the area when it happened, but one of my friends, she always got the code Vs. It was like a joke, like I get all the BBPs and she gets all the code Vs. You make fun, you make it light, you make it like, it's okay. Custodial is like a blessing. It is hard work, but it's just different because, you know, people aren't really necessarily breathing down your neck. You know, people kind of ignore you in the bathroom. I don't know, it's very routine based. You know, you kind of go through the same motions every single day, you know, in the whatever zone you're in, kind of get in a flow. One thing about Riverside, not every resort does this. It's hard to say which ones do and which ones don't. But at Riverside specifically, our collection shifts were going around to the different trash rooms of the buildings and collecting the trash from the housekeepers. So not every resort does that. Some housekeepers at some resorts will have to take their own trash and do like, you know, they deal with the trash. But at Riverside and French Quarter specifically, the custodian did that and you took the trash. And that shift was like a 10 to 6:30 shift where you just literally were in a Pargo that had like a metal, if I find a photo, I will put it in. And you just drove it around to the different trash rooms, collecting trash until your Pargo was full to take it back to the compactor. And it was a lot of work. It was kind of brutal work. I would say collections was like the most physical job to do as a custodian at the resort. It was some hard work. Some people really liked it. Some people loved collections. I personally did not. It was hard. The job before going to the DCP, I worked at a grocery store breaking down pallets. So I had some strength in doing that, but it was hard. It was physically demanding, and in the Florida heat, it was just a little brutal. You had to do this work, rain or shine. Anyways, I feel like I've talked a lot about resort custodial, but I don't feel like you see a ton about resort custodial. And hopefully what I went into answered your questions or answered any questions you had, but let me know in the comments if you have anything else that you want to know about resort custodial. This is just kind of an overview of kind of my brain, but just wanted to get into that a little bit because I feel like I saw a video of someone post about resort custodial and it was 5 years ago, and I was like, this is a little outdated, but I will watch this because this is all I could get. The thing I will talk about is savings and money. Not everyone goes into this, the DCP YouTubers or TikTok, I worked, I worked in college and I worked at a grocery store and I worked literally a week before going to my program, which I kind of regret doing a little bit now. I wish I had at least maybe a month off before going to my program just to relax and do stuff because I came straight from college, I worked, and then I did the program. So I wish I took a little time off. That's just my own personal reflection. People are really concerned with money on the program, which I totally get. I think what you need to have saved is what is dependent on you. If you have any bills or any things that are coming out monthly, you need to factor that in on, what money you have saved, because your checks do get paid weekly at the Walt Disney Company, which is super nice in a way, but also it's at the DCP, you are spending money. You're going into the parks, you're buying food, you're buying merch, you buy things, which is so normal and it's expected. So I think you need to factor in everything, all the costs of some of the normal things you have, and go from there. Projected what I was, gonna spend the first month of my program, where your checks aren't coming in because you're there for about a week or two before you get your first paycheck. So keep that in mind when calculating things about going out there, is because you're not getting paid for the first 2 weeks you're there. You do get paid for traditions and going to those classes, but you don't get that check until the next week. And it's a small check because obviously you're not working a ton. In traditions is maybe, I forget how long it was. It wasn't super long. You gotta keep things in mind. But advice that I had that was really helpful before going out onto my program was write a list of everything that I know I'm going to pay to get out to the program. Because I mentioned before, I'm from California. It was I'm willing to not have a car for 6 months, whatever. They have the buses for a reason. I can give up my car. So I flew out here and I bought a one-way ticket. One way for me in the summer, because I started in August, was about $300, just under $400. to get out here. So these are some of the things you have to start calculating. So for me, I had my plane ticket, my hotel costs, the cost of transportation from the airport to the hotel, and from the hotel, Flamingo, because I did stay on Disney property, so I could use mirrors. You know, these are just some things like hotel, plane, transportation, food, and then also what you're to spend to set yourself up in your apartment. I personally brought my sheets, but you know, some of these necessities like pillows, all like cleaning supplies, kitchenware are things that you are gonna have to buy when you're out there. So I projected I'm gonna spend about $1,500 at least. So I made sure I had that in savings and doubled it just for any like precautions, you know, because things happen. Buffer in your savings is super helpful. I would recommend save as much as you want where you have enough. For me, I just relied on my paycheck. About after a month of living in the program and living down there, I didn't have to rely on any of my savings. Budget well if you are smart about what you buy and you eat what you buy, you know, food-wise, you can live in your budget and within your check. Though personally, I did live in a 2x2, which is the cheapest option and the one they have the most of. So it's not like super hard. You have more coming back to you than people living in a 4x2 and a 4x4. Because for me, rent was $202. I believe rent right now is $215. So just reminder that gets automatically taken out. Like you don't even have to worry about not having that in your check. I just had to work at least 2 shifts in a week, cover for rent, and like make just enough for rent. You kind of will figure out like how much days you need to work in order to make rent. For me, it was 2 because I worked 8-hour shifts, got paid for 8-hour shifts, even though it was an 8.5-hour shift, 16 hours. That was enough for me to make rent. You have some leeway in your own things of like how much money you need to make rent. Because really, that was my focus. Make enough to make rent. And automatically, you as a CP will get enough hours to make rent and more. Like I personally worked 40 hours. I know one of my roommates worked 32 and then like various in between. It does depend on what role you get for how many hours you get and the length of your shifts. But for me personally, I worked about 40. I never really had to worry about money a ton. When I was there the first month, you were a little like pulling from my savings because obviously you haven't been there long. You're buying things. You're like, oh, I want this shirt. Oh, I want those ears. For me, I really like pen trading. So I was like, oh, I want that pen. You know, so it's like you're buying things. You know your spending habits. For me, I'm not a huge spender. I'm like one to think about things. Like I bought a Big Hero 6 thing, but I had literally waited like 3 weeks to buy it. Like I had seen it and then I was like, oh, that's cute. Let me take a photo of it. I'm back a couple weeks later. It's still there. And I was like, oh, this is a sign for me to buy it. I've been thinking about it. For me, that's kind of a little bit more how I am as a consumer, especially with clothes. I know some people buy a ton. They eat out all the time. And even when I was eating out in the parks, you know, across the street from Flamingo, I never felt like I was like spending a ton of money. Because I had the money from the check. So I think it just depends. It is nice though to have a savings just in case especially if you have a lot of bills to pay, you know, outside of the Flamingo bills. In my opinion, you don't really have to worry about like paying a ton for the like utilities because if you turn off the lights, you will be fine on electricity and stuff. Just, you know, just be like mindful of like leaving the lights on and stuff like that. And me and my roommate left the fan on 24/7. We never got charged extra electricity. Now that I've talked about money, let me know if you have any other questions about like money. I want to try to like give you the most information I can. I feel like this is a good segue into Flamingo and living. So like I've mentioned, I lived in a 2x2 and I lived in Flamingo West. I liked Flamingo West a lot better than East. Maybe because I lived in West, I thought West was really easy to navigate. West is quieter. Everyone will agree West is typically quieter because one, you don't have the programs board there, so it's a little bit smaller of a community. Right across the street, it's like takes 10 minutes with the lights to walk to the Target across the street or walk to the Dunkin' or walk to the Starbucks or walk to the Pyology or the Wendy's or the 7-Eleven. Like, it does not take you a lot long to walk across the street to go to that shopping plaza. For West, you do have like the easeability of that. But I do think it is easier when you live in East if you're trying to go to those dorm classes, the classes offered by the programs board, because you just walk out of your apartment and you just walk over to the building. If you're living in West, it's like there's some steps, which aren't like impossible, but it makes it a little bit harder because you're like, oh, I have to take the bus, get there on time. The 2x2, obviously not preferred, but it's not the worst. Personally, was on the side of the window, which was really nice because I felt like I have a little bit more space because of the window, and I also like the natural light a lot better. You have like kind of your own corner, and you can really decorate the room for your own. You have plenty of space with the locking drawer, the dresser, the closet. Like, I felt like I had a ton of space. I personally, because I flew out there and I flew by myself, coming to the DCP, I brought 2 suitcases and a backpack. So all I brought with me was that, and I bought whatever I else needed when I got there. Plus, the room I went into, all 4 of us had the same arrival date. So all 4 of us girls all got there on the same day. So our apartment didn't have anything in it. So, because sometimes when you go into an apartment, there will already be people living in it, and you might not need to buy certain things because they're like, oh yeah, I can I'm willing to share my Swiffer, or I'm willing to share this, or yeah, this is our communal cleaning supplies. Please contribute to it. But like for us, we were coming into an empty apartment, so there was a little bit more buying, and I think you're obviously not had to buy cleaning supplies like clean your room, clean the kitchen, be a polite roommate. You will most likely have to deal with bugs in your rooms, in your living spaces. As a Californian, never had to deal with some of these bugs before. Personally, like the cockroaches. My apartment had cockroaches, so just fair warning, they are there. I had to like gaslight myself into being like, if I don't see them, they're not there, because how could I cook in the kitchen? No, like if I had to like adapt that mindset for myself. It doesn't bother a lot. Like some people, it doesn't even bother them. But for me, it was really bothersome. Get raid. Like, and you also have silverfish. On the first floor, like one of my friends dealt with a lot of like worms. Forget what type of worms, but like they would like sit them in their door edges because that helped. That was like a natural remedy. But I think if you keep your apartment clean, you don't keep food out, you take out the trash regularly, you can do some preventative actions on lowering the things for bugs. But there are gonna be bugs. When I was thinking about going on the DCP, I made a pros and cons list, and one of the things on the cons was bugs. So take that as you will. I know that was a sidetrack because I was gonna get into dorms classes, specifically the programs classes. They are so hard to get into. Like, you need to make a reminder of a reminder to make sure you register, because those classes fill up quick. When you sign up for a class, you're most likely signing up months in advance. My advice for you, if you want to do the dorms classes, always be looking and checking dorms. And if you see a class that you like that has not dropped yet, set an alarm, a reminder, a calendar reminder that you need to sign up at what specific time. On dorms, it will say what time it will drop for registration. Get on dorms a couple minutes before that. They do walk-ins. It can be tricky to get into these classes, which is okay, but it is a little tricky, and you're like, well, why can't I get into this class? Buses. I didn't think the Flamingo buses were that bad. Some people had issues with them. What I would recommend on the Flamingo buses is when you first get there, like within that week, take a bus to whatever route you're going on, especially if you're to be utilizing the buses, just in time how long it takes for you to get to the stop that you have to get off on. For me, that bus, I took the H bus, which only went to Port Orleans resorts. To get to Cast Services, where I got off personally, it took 40 minutes. If I was working a 3:30 shift, I got on the bus that left at 2:20. Because that was the only bus that would get me there at 3. It would get me there at 3 o'clock, right before 3 o'clock, right on the dot, depended on traffic, for me to get there to work on time. I did make friends with people with cars, and I did go with them, a good chunk, but like, you're to be taking the bus if you don't have a car. My last point that I want to make in this video, have fun, of course. Like, enjoy your time there. Take every opportunity you can. The time will go by quick, and just enjoy. Go to the parks by yourself. Take a backstage tour. Like, you know, do everything. Like, do what you want to do. I made a bucket list before going on my program, and I completed most of it besides a couple. Like, you will have so much fun, and I think it's important to focus on fun. Especially, you know, it's a lot of hard work. There's so much more I could get into, but take advantage of the moment of being on the DCP. It's a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun out there. But let me know if you have any other questions. I am more than happy to answer them. And thank you for watching. If you got all the way here, overall, it was a really fun time. So, bye.